Yeah, no, that's amazing. You mentioned, because I think that is so essential to acknowledge that we all have, different stories within us, right? I think the word I want to just clarify that point, acting in a minute. But when you are participating in different aspects of your life, you kind of are doing those different roles. You're playing the role of a
Yeah.
husband or a father or a colleague or a professional. But and I think that's great. I think that's the depth of a human being, and also the entire potential of the individual. Um, what I was referring to specifically was this sense where we're told this word today, that which is authenticity, right? I'm sure you
Yeah.
of course believe in it, and so do I. But more and more now, I'm just looking around and listening to what's happening around. You have these narratives which are more popular than others on popular media, social media, where if you are said or seen or heard saying certain things which you might authentically feel, it goes against the grain of popular media, and automatically you heard this, right? Cancel culture or canceling someone.
Yeah.
And as a result, that's what I was referring to as acting. You might have to say things or do things or behave in a certain way which is not natural to you, or might not be authentic to you, or might not even be a form of honest expression. So how do you help someone? Because I think it's great what you're doing with giving a person the potential to accept all their various versions, and also present that, and help them bring that on a compelling and honest and with conviction. But when we live in a world today where there are certain things that are rewarded and certain things that are punished, how do you help someone navigate that dilemma? If that's
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's hard. I think the two things that are most important is understanding your audience.
Mm.
So, it's never about you. It's always about them. And if we put the spotlight on ourselves, then, ego and our own kind of worldview can be too prominent. Whereas if we put our spotlight on our audience and think, who am I sharing this message with and why, then that starts to change things. And then I think the other piece is around vulnerability. So I always think that vulnerability brings power. The more open you can be, the more vulnerable you can be, the more powerful you are, because you kind of say to the people that you're engaging with, I'm not scared of you, but you don't need to be scared of me. And I take your point. In kind of popular culture right now, there's quite an aggressive trend to be controversial and to be difficult. And I think those things burn quickly and they burn brightly, but ultimately, they disappear off the radar quite quickly as well. And hopefully, in some
Common
cases,
sense will prevail, hopefully.
yeah. And I think consistency is really, really important. If people see you being consistently different, then they kind of go like, who is this person? So you have to be the same you in all of the team meetings that you go to, or all of the conversations that you have with your family. If you're constantly like switching your personality, then people will find that very kind of disconcerting in the end. So I think whilst we're talking about range and we're talking about nuance, at the heart of that is your decision to say, this is me, and I'm okay with that. I'm happy for you to see me, and I'm happy to show up in the world and share who I am.
And that must be hard, especially coming from the Hollywood industry, or even the British film industry, or even being on stage, right? Because I can kind of empathize a little bit with the stage aspect, being a comedian for some years. Is when as a this is not so much the content of what we're acting out or telling in our respective fields, but there's this image that actors get, right? There's this pressure that comes along with being an actor. There's a public image, and automatically there's a level of comparison where how you are in your last role, or what role you take up in the next movie or the next play. And just like how when we look at a conversation with Elon Musk or with Steve Jobs interview from 1999, you kind of just look at certain beneficial aspects of those people, or whether it's Leonardo DiCaprio, whoever it may be, right? And you kind of
Yeah.
look at the success, the stories of success, or even if it's like a rags to riches story, you look at the positive, which I think is fine. But there's so much more to it, right? Because I'm not a trained actor, I'm not been to acting school, but I can only assume that it's not for every good actor there, who's not successful. I mean, there are so many good actors who haven't made it that big, but at the same time,
Oh,
there are so many
yeah.
actors who haven't even made it beyond a certain point. So there is a lot of depth to the art form of acting. So
Mhm.
how because even there you have to pick your story, right? Because you might not agree with or might not like certain scripts that were given to you, and you might not like. So did that process of selection, or how did you navigate the world of film and navigate the world of stage acting when and how did those skills help you after you got out of that space?
So one of the things that I find most frustrating about that industry is that it's not linear, and I'm sure this will resonate with you from the kind of comedy world, that you can give a fantastic performance and you can have a really good review or critical acclaim, and then the next time you step up, it's like snakes and ladders. You go down the snake and you're starting from scratch again. So in most jobs, if I join an organization as a junior accountant, and then I work my way up to accountant, and then I become senior accountant, and then I become head of finance, and then I become CFO, and there's this kind of like career path that is almost kind of mapped out for you. And in the world of acting, I found that wasn't the case. I found that continually I was having perceived success, and then you get to the end of that job and you kind of go, oh god, like what's next?
Mm,
And I'll be very honest, I found that very difficult and very frustrating. I had a couple of instances in my career, where I thought, oh, I'm doing the best work ever, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, back to the beginning again. But what that does give you is a sense of resilience, and what it also did for me is it made me start to kind of question what was most important to me. And one of the things that I think I liked least about the world of acting was that it was very self-centered. So you're
mm.
absolutely right. It was like, how do I look? Is my six pack good enough? What's my hair doing today? Rather than what's important to others. How can I help? So it became inherently quite selfish. And from a values perspective, I'm not sure that ever sat particularly well with me. I always felt that there was something missing, which is I suppose why I transitioned my career from acting to directing, because then it was about facilitating a team and helping people fulfill their creative potential rather than making it all kind of about me.
Yeah, and that's another thing which we experience globally. Like in India, of course, the Bollywood and regional film industry is now exploding on various
Yeah.
scales, right? Like even on the global front with the Oscars recently, Indian film picking up Best Song. So these characters, right? These stars from like say Shah Rukh Khan to a Ranveer Singh, and even across to sport, you have these sporting celebrities, and as you very rightly pointed out, it's a very self-centered thing, and people just the adulation, and then when it when it crosses over from film, like then you look at this person who's great as an actor, and then you say, oh, you know what, they give the best marital advice. I'm like, but how? I mean, how are these people suddenly transcending the realm of being great screen actors or great stage actors or great cricketers or footballers to now becoming social icons who we must emulate and whom we must worship? For what reason, right? Where does that come from?
I was very lucky because I was having my acting career before the days of, a proper mobile phone. I think I had a
Mhm.
Nokia 3210 or whatever it was called back then. And
We're in the same age, yeah.
and so there wasn't that sort of social media pressure. And I speak to young actors now who say that actually, their social media presence and how many followers they have on X or Instagram is a contributing factor to whether or not they get cast in the role. And I'm like, God, that's exhausting, because trying
Mm.
to have a social media presence is a job in and of itself. But I think what's interesting, if I think back to my experience as an actor, your your opportunity to kind of get to let your ego get in the way is actually quite huge. I remember I was on set for Thunderbirds, and we were in kind of the background of quite a lot of scenes. We didn't have a huge amount to do, but you were kind of in and out every morning at this particular point in time. And as a kind of senior cast member, you normally get someone attached to you, so you get a third assistant director whose job it is to kind of pick you up and move you from your dressing room to the makeup room and take you from the makeup room to the set, and they obviously sit within a hierarchy as well.
Mm.
So they're reporting directly into the second assistant director, who's then reporting into the first assistant director. And so in those sorts of environments, everyone has their job. As an actor, it can be really easy to get bored. You've been picked up by a driver at 5:30 in the morning. You arrive on set at 6:15. You sit in your dressing room for 20 minutes. Then you go and do hair and makeup. Then you go back to your dressing room. And I remember this one particular day where I just really wanted a cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd asked my this runner or third AD whether they would mind getting me one, because we weren't allowed to walk onto set before we'd gone to hair and makeup. So, can you get me a cup of tea? And about 20 minutes later, this kind of cup of tea hadn't arrived. And I remember very vividly kind of him, like me, suddenly getting very frustrated, because actually it was kind of like a little prison. I wasn't allowed to move my box, come out of my box. And I felt that kind of pressure building in myself to be like angry with this guy who hadn't got me a cup of tea. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go and I'm going to get my own cup of tea. So
Yeah.
I kind of crept out of my dressing room, went onto set and grabbed a cup of tea. And when I got back to the dressing room, the guy said to me, he said, why did you get your own cup of tea? And I said, well, you didn't get me a cup of tea, and I really wanted a cup of tea. And he said, but I got into trouble because I'm meant to be the one that gets you. Like, so it's this kind of minefield. So you can see quite easily how, certain actors get a really bad reputation as being difficult to work with and short, because to a certain extent, the situation that you find yourself in encourages that. And I could have quite easily, turned into a monster and started saying, get me this, get me that. And I didn't realize quite, how prevailing the ecosystem was and how many people's toes you might be treading on if you start to break the rules. So it's not easy.
Yeah, because that word, right, that ecosystem across the board, it's a pecking order, right? Each person is in their own little bubble, and that bubble can either isolate them from the structure at large or why they're even there, to another level of creating the sense of importance within that bubble, right? Because you do have a person who's shadowing you for your various needs, but at the same time, if you're not aware that that person's a part of a cog in a machine which is responsible for something else, answerable to someone else, then you can just kind of wave your arm, say, hey, you know what, I'm the king in my little bubble, and I can just shout and get my way. And
Yeah.
it's I mean, by design, it sounds like it sounds like a system that caters to the ego. And now, even in
But
sport,
it's not that.
Yeah, sorry.
It's not that different from like 99% of organizations that you walk into, though.
Yeah,
If you think like, here's your CFO, and here's the C-suite, and here's the middle management, and what is fascinating to me is that in that creative industry, the best sets, the best teams are the ones where that kind of hierarchy is not dispatched with, but is loosened and flattened. So yeah, I gave that example of Thunderbirds, of where I felt like that. But in fairness to the person at the top, so Jonathan Frakes was the director of the show, and he was Riker in Star Trek, so he was an actor himself. He knew how these things worked,
Right.
and he was absolutely brilliant about creating an atmosphere on set where everyone felt valued, and everyone knew what their role was, but also, felt empowered to be part of that creative process. So yeah, I learned a lot of lessons in leadership from watching people like Jonathan run those sets, because when it's done well, actually things work, except for getting a cup of tea. Things work really well in the background and in the main. And it's where those things break down, and where people do go into those silos, that I think problems start to exist, whatever industry you're working in.